The correct assembly of your ASR high performance end links is vital to the optimal operation of your ASR sway bar kit. This video will focus on the assembly of one end link. However, the assembly for the other end link is exactly the same. To begin the assembly process, first install the jam nut on the male side of the rod end and thread it all the way through. Next, you will need to thread in the male rod end into the female rod end. Thread it all the way in, then back it out slightly so that the orientation of the top and bottom rod ends are 90 degrees to each other. This will ensure the rod end is at its shortest setting, which is recommended for most driving conditions. Move the jam nut down and tighten it. Next, install the large cone spacer onto a bolt so that the face of the spacer is flush with the bolt head. Feed the bolt through the male end of the bearing. Next, install a small cone spacer so that the smaller end inserts into the bearing. Once you have finished placing the spacers, place a lock nut at the end to ensure the parts do not move. For the female side of the end link, slide a short cone spacer on top of the second bolt so it is flush with the head of that bolt. Put this bolt through the bearing located on the female side of the rod end. Lastly, place the last small cone spacer so its smaller end inserts into the bearing. Lightly screw on the last lock nut to finish the assembly for your ASR end link. Be sure to repeat this process for your other end link assembly. The installation of this setup is intended for the EK chassis with the use of our 1-inch hollow sway bar. If you have any variation in your suspension setup, as in different lower control arms, different sway bar, or a different chassis, you may need to manipulate your end links differently to achieve the optimal 90-degree angle. We sell additional large and small cone spacers that you may purchase on our website to provide you with extra adjustability. To begin the installation process, first, be sure that the bearings are perpendicular and locked to each other. This will ensure they do not move when you're installing. With the female side of the end link facing down, install the bearing to the center hole on the lower control arm. Use a bolt with a small cone spacer and push it through the bearing. Next, use an additional small cone spacer and place it on the opposite side of the end link. The lower portion of your end link assembly should look just like this. Now you may thread the bolt into the center hole on the lower control arm. If you have already installed our ASR lower control arms, the end of the bolt will easily thread into the lower control arm. If you are using stock or a different lower control arm, you may need to use the lock nut provided to you in order to mount the female end of the end link to your lower control arm. Next, place a small cone spacer on the second bolt provided to you and thread that through the male side of the rod end. Place the large cone spacer through the bolt on the other side of the bearing. Hold the assembly and push it through the middle mounting hole on the sway bar. Place the lock nut at the end of the bolt. Do not tighten the top portion of the end link just yet. You may tighten the bottom portion of the end link first. Use a 14mm wrench or socket to achieve this. Do not use an impact. You may now tighten the top portion of your end link using a 14mm wrench to hold the bolt on the end of the end link and a 17mm wrench to tighten the lock nut on the other side of the sway bar. You have now completed the install of your ASR end link with an optimal 90-degree angle. We recommend this angle for all sway bar stiffness settings. Once you have achieved a 90-degree upright angle, you may manipulate the sway bar portion of the Endlink. The hole closest to the rear of the vehicle will give you a stiffer sway bar setting, and the hole farthest from the rear of the vehicle will give you the softest sway bar setting.